David got arrested for murder, and the coroner still can't tell us how she died.
Tonight, dramatic video captured by TMZ showing the tense moments LAPD officers arrested singer David on suspicion of murdering a teenage girl who had been found dead in the trunk of his car.
Okay, so here's what we know. On April 16th, the LAPD picked up David and arrested him, and he is currently being held without bail. Right now, he is being charged for the murder of Celeste Rivas, whose body was found decomposed inside of his trunk last year.
14-year-old Celeste Rivas found inside the front trunk of a Tesla registered to David Burke. The 21-year-old performs under the name David with tens of millions of monthly Spotify listeners. He's now being held without bail.
And here's where it gets sticky. 7 months later, her cause of death is still listed as deferred. After spending years in the ICU, I know what bodies look like when they shut down. And I've sat with families who've never gotten an answer. So let me walk you through why this case was built on a foundation that an autopsy can't solve. Let's set the table. On September 8th, 2025, the LAPD found a Tesla that had numerous parking violations, so they towed it to an impound. There, the employees reported smelling a foul odor. They opened the trunk, and inside, they find a body wrapped up and decomposed past the point of identification. Dental records eventually confirmed that it was Celeste Rivas, a teenager who was reported missing for almost a year. The car was registered to David Anthony Burke, aka David. For 7 months, the LAPD worked on this case quietly. And in that time, David canceled his tours, retreated from the spotlight, and he moved from the house that he was renting at the time. All of this while the public narrative was sitting in limbo. All because the medical examiner wouldn't release the cause of her death. But then, on April 16th, an arrest warrant was issued and David has been held without bond. And the question that everyone's asking, which by the way, his defense attorney is going to be asking as well, is if you don't know how she died, how can you prove he killed her?
Tonight, David's attorneys say in a statement, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. And David, the LA District Attorney is now reviewing the case. They say they're expecting to announce on Monday whether they'll be filing charges. David.
Trevor Alt reporting tonight. Trevor, thank you.
That's not a rhetorical question. That's a real legal problem. And the reason for that problem is medical. So here's what cause of death deferred actually means. When a medical examiner can't determine the cause of death at the time of autopsy, they defer it, which means they hold the ruling open, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes indefinitely. And in this time, they're basically waiting for toxicology, tissue analysis, and any new evidence to show up. In Celeste's case, deferred is starting to look permanent. And here's the reason for that. Her body was found in a trunk in a Los Angeles September for somewhere between weeks to months before she was found. Now, I'm not going to describe what that does to a body in detail because her family doesn't need to hear that. But what I will say is that her body decomposed. And a lot of people think of decomposition as just one process when it's really four. The first stage is autolysis, and that can happen in the first 24 to 72 hours. And what that means is that your cells basically begin to digest themselves from the inside out. The next step is putrefaction, and that is where the bacteria that's in your gut and your intestines basically begin to multiply and take over, which basically causes the body to bloat. The third step is active decay, and in that stage, basically your body begins to liquefy and all soft tissue is lost. And all soft tissue is lost. And the fourth step is skeletonization. And that basically is where all that's left is just the solid structures, like your skeleton and your hair. By the time the LAPD opened that trunk, Celeste was past active decay. And here's what that means for the case. No soft tissue means no strangulation marks. It means no bruising patterns. And it means no defensive wounds on the hands. The physical evidence that tells the medical examiner how someone died was gone long before anyone even knew she was missing. And let me say something else. I've worked with families who sat across from me holding an autopsy report that still didn't give them a cause of death. My job in that moment wasn't medical, or it wasn't to be an ICU nurse. It was to help that family find peace with never knowing. And sometimes, and that's one of the hardest things that I have to do. The Hernandez family might be going through that very same experience. And that's why this case matters just beyond the headlines and clicks. Okay, so your next question probably is, what about drugs? Was she poisoned? Can toxicology find anything? And toxicology is very interesting because in a dead body, it lies. There's a phenomenon called post-mortem redistribution. And what that means is when you die and you take drugs, the drugs don't just stay where they were when your heart stopped. What often happens is that they will move from inside the cell to inside your bloodstream. Also, it'll move from the liver to the surrounding organs. So what this all means is that a drug level measured in the body while they were alive will be very different from the drug levels in the body that's been decomposed. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, sometimes the drug breaks down entirely and you aren't even able to detect it. To make matters worse, for a body that's been through active decay, bacterial byproducts mimic alcohol, tissue breakdown destroys anything that you could even try to find, and the blood that's there is either contaminated or unusable. So even if someone did poison Celeste, the medical examiner can't tell if that was the level of the drugs that killed her or if that's what her body did to itself after 6 months inside of a trunk. And there's one important distinction that the public might not be aware of. A medical examiner can rule on two things: the cause of death and the manner of death. The cause of death is simply just the event that led to the person's death, and the manner of death is the circumstances. And you can, in fact, have a manner without a cause. In this case, the medical examiner can rule this as a homicide based on the circumstances, which are a body found wrapped up in a trunk that was meant to be hidden, and they can do this without ever proving what literally killed her. The only problem is that in court, this may not be as strong. Like, that seems to be where this is heading for the Rivas family. So could David get away with murder? Legally, his defense is going to argue what I just walked you through. They're going to say no cause of death, compromised toxicology, and no physical injury pattern. They're going to say that the prosecution can't prove how she died, so they can't prove he killed her. But here's what they can explain away. A little girl was found inside of your car, wrapped up and hidden. Those are circumstances that a jury can deliberate on without a cause of death. The medical reason for why David might walk away from this is real, but the medical reason isn't the only reason. A jury doesn't need an autopsy to recognize what hiding the body of a child in a trunk says about the person that might have put her there. The evidence in this case is imperfect, but I do hope that they are able to hold David accountable if he is guilty for this. And I look forward to seeing his defense being tested in the courtroom. Type guilty or deferred in the comments. And if you like this kind of video, consider subscribing because I definitely am going to be making more like this. I'm DTV. Peace.